New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee. I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Well, for the rest of the summer here, we're presenting segments from our shows of the first 6 months of the regime. As I go back and I listen and I edit, it's kind of disheartening to hear the problems of several months ago that have only increased in scope and severity. We were warning then about our own lack of imagination as to how far the fascists are capable of going, both here and abroad. You'll hear in this episode we talked about Bibi Netanyahu as a war criminal on U.S. soil, just as this past week another war criminal, Vladimir Putin, was welcomed, a red carpet on U.S. soil. Disgusting. And of course the news from Israel, the news from Gaza just gets worse day by day. And if you need a reminder as to why we should be upset about Gaza, well, first, just because it's heinous, it's a world-scale humanitarian crisis and a war crime. And we're paying for it. This is ours. This is us. This is not something happening halfway around the globe. We as Americans have our hands all over this. It's impossible without U.S. money. It's impossible without U.S. arms and munitions. And then, of course, you have the whole litany of crimes being committed every day by the orange fascist in Washington, D.C. So, yeah, I'll continue to call for a sense of urgency, for direct action that goes far beyond peaceful street protests. Real disruption of the system. Real revolution. So I hope this review and perspective has some value for you. In the meantime, this show features clips from April 7th and 10th, episodes 519 and 520. Speaking of jobs, one of his many reasons for these tariffs, the big one he's landed on is to bring back manufacturing jobs. Which is also, if you just think about it for half a second, you mean all the manufacturing jobs that will be lost to AI and to robotics in the next couple of years? As the experts tell us, even if you give him the biggest benefit of the doubt, okay, let's say he's right. All these tariffs on foreign countries will force manufacturers to build factories here in the United States and bring jobs here. Let's just pretend that would actually happen for a second. Even if it did, it would take 3, 4, 5 years to ramp up production. 3, 4, 5 years in terms of AI and robotics? Those factories are going to be completely automated. It has nothing to do with jobs. This is also just incredibly stupid. What else happened on Friday? Well, he golfed again, of course. Spent Friday golfing, and then Friday night, apparently there's another big dinner at Mar-a-Lago, a big fundraiser again with all of his sycophants. Also on Friday, those 4 soldiers who died in that tragic accident in Lithuania were returned to the United States. And whenever the remains of a fallen U.S. service member are returned, they have this ceremony at the airport called dignified transfer. And it's very solemn, and the flag-draped coffins are carried by service members. Family members are there, dignitaries, often the president. And if you saw the reports, this was really moving. The people of Lithuania came out by the thousands, filled the streets in tears as these soldiers were on their way back home from Lithuania. And they had this big ceremony, and the president of Lithuania spoke, and he was in tears. And it was really very moving. I was amazed by the pictures I saw. And so for this dignified transfer, it happened Friday night while the Orange Menace was golfing and having a nice, luxurious dinner with gold-plated knives and forks at Mar-a-Lago. Jesus, Mother Mary and Joseph, this guy. Yeah, he skipped the event to be with his buddies and the Saudis who sponsored 9/11. at his swank, gauche, tacky private Florida club. In other news, on Saturday, a third day of golfing, and he qualified for the finals in his club golf tournament. So Dear Leader is just doing great there. And then on Sunday, the Orange Menace golfed for a fourth day in a row and took another club championship. Good for Dear Leader. Thinking the unthinkable, suggesting the impossible. Things I'm not supposed to say. Things like, I don't give a shit about the economy. The whole damn system can just fall for all I care. In fact, I hope it does. You can't say this out loud. I'm saying it out loud today. The whole damn thing just needs to crash. I don't care anymore. No, let me correct that. I want it to. Because I don't see any other way we get out of this. We need a real alternative to defeat MAGA. So if the whole thing has to fall apart in order for all of us to get together and build something new, so be it. Going back to what we had, the same old corporate Democrats, late-stage capitalism, this weak, damaged democracy. You really can't even call it a democracy, even before the Orange Menace. No, only a real alternative system can both defeat MAGA and create a real alternative that we can have for long-term success. It puts MAGA in the history books for the next 500 years. Donald Trump is destroying the office of the presidency, and I'm all for it. The new system after the revolution has to have a very weak figurehead president. They can be strong only in seeing that the laws are enforced, laws that are created by the people's house, but not one that sets policy. I don't want a president setting policy. I don't want one person with all this power. It's ridiculous. This is what we have to lose. So if Trump is destroying that, good. By the way, if you're using this situation to raise political money, I hate you. If you're capitulating to hold power, I hate you. If you're using this situation to run for president, Democrats, they're all talk and no walk. Talk is cheap. It's time to disrupt. Democrats, stop telling us it's up to us. That's all I keep hearing from them. Oh, it's up to you. Do your job. Stop the gears of Congress. Obstruct. Join the protesters. Don't just get up in front of them and make a speech. Join them on the front line. Chain yourself to something. Get arrested. The speeches are all well and good, but come on. You got to get your hands dirty. So elected officials, get on the ball. Media, so-called liberal talking heads are making things worse. Stop treating political analysis like it's sports analysis, like it's some big game. And stop being led around by the nose, chasing the daily headlines, chasing the daily tweets and proclamations of Dear Leader Orange Menace. What are you doing? It's like he's got one of these laser pointers and the media is a cat chasing it around. Now, if you're reporting straight news, that's fine. Report all the straight news you want. But the real problem is these endless hours of analysis and opinion, much of which is like just totally snooty and academic and like 30,000 feet too high. You know, the Ezra Kleins of the world. Come on, give us something we can use. And then for others in the media, if your content primarily consists of cheap shots at MAGA weirdos, just shut up. You're not helping. If you want to pepper those little stories in occasionally, fine. It's entertaining. But don't make that your whole deal. And while we're at it, if you're not a professional comedian, stop trying to be funny. You're not helping. Media, if you're just using this situation to get likes and clicks, I hate you. If you're using this to sell books or promote your content or build your brand, I hate you. If you're not offering or at least promoting or covering some concrete action, then just shut up already. If you really want to help, cover the protest, interview organizers, give us ideas, give us strategies and tactics that we can use. If you're just doing all the other stuff, shut up already. You're not helping. And then there's this whole area of elite universities and law firms and corporations. If you're capitalizing on the situation to make money, screw you. If you're capitulating, if you're bowing down in order to make money or to keep your money, screw you. And then all of us, the public, we have to take our own responsibility too. I mean, protesting only goes so far. You and I have talked about this at length. We need disruptive actions that shut down business as usual until our demands are met. From the people I'm criticizing here, elite media, politicians, many of us ourselves in the public, there's just a lack of imagination as to how bad this can get and how good we can be if we really think in terms of a revolution. So there's a lack of imagination. For many, there's a lack of urgency still, and especially from the ruling class and from the so-called centrists in media and politics. Lack of urgency is mind-boggling. Because we need a movement as bold as Trumpism has been. For everything you can say about MAGA, it's bold. So in order to defeat MAGA, in order to hold the victory and not backslide, we need a movement that is at least as bold. Progressive populism. All of you centrists, all of you moderates, all of you folks who want to compromise and find common ground, you need to just get out of the way. You're not helping. In fact, you're making our job impossible. Voters may very well put the Democrats back in Congress in 26. In fact, I'm expecting it. I'm also expecting a Democratic president to be elected in 2028. So that's why our movement has to be revolutionary. It has to be progressive populism, and it has to be more powerful than MAGA. We not only have to win, but we have to have the legs to maintain it. Otherwise, it's just some sort of uncomfortable ceasefire where we cede all the ground we've already lost. When we come out of this thing, we have to have lateral power. Power must be distributed laterally. That is democracy. And that means a weak president. I don't want a strong president. I want a president who is a boring manager, who sees to it that the laws are enforced, just like it says in the Constitution. Our movement has to put money away in a drawer where it can't hurt us anymore. Profit needs to go. Money and profit need to be extracted. They need to be surgically removed from the body politic. They can't be in charge anymore. We need negative growth. We need negative GDP, which both the Repugs and the Dems are just married to because they're not revolutionary parties. Well, the Repugs are when it comes to installing fascism. And an extreme special disdain for so-called centrists who think they can get between these two and accomplish anything. Make the world better, make our lives better. No, we need to come out of this as revolutionaries with a brand new system. Hierarchical power, gone. The power of money, gone. Freedom to work and live as you choose. We'll all work. People will work. What makes you think they won't work without the threat of poverty and literal death hanging over their heads? You really think that little of people? Is your opinion of your fellow humans that incredibly low that you think they'll only work and serve the common good under a threat of poverty and death? Is that what you think? And nobody in mainstream media, in mainstream government is offering any sort of reform analysis or solutions. Nobody. I mean, for God's sakes, even Bernie and AOC advocate for growth. They're considered far left by the corporate media. Our lack of imagination is unfathomable. I mean, the Democrats, have you noticed in their arguments of these breathless response to the tariffs? Have you noticed in their arguments, well, we have to have cheap foreign labor, otherwise prices will go up. We have to have cheap immigrant labor. These are Democrats making these arguments. We can't live without exploited foreign labor. Children in China building iPhones? We have to maintain this system, otherwise our iPhones will cost too much. What kind of depravity is this? These are the Democrats. This is the so-called left. You think they're making this wonderful, empathetic, left-wing argument on behalf of immigrants, but then they come right out and say it out loud. Well, do you want your lettuce to triple in price? We need to have cheap labor that can be exploited. We got to start thinking like revolutionaries, people. We got to get out of this mindset. We have to escape this mind-numbing way of looking at the world. And if you think that this current situation is enough to kick us into a new era, take it from someone who's been down this road before. I thought Watergate would change things when we discovered the corruption of government. I thought the Bush administration and their torture policies and their preemptive strikes, I thought that would change America for the better as we realized the evil of that. I thought the 2008 economic collapse would change America when we discovered that the whole thing is just built like a house of cards and all based on debt and gaming the financial system. Well, surely the Americans will see how bad this system is and will demand not only alleviation of current pains, but a new system, real, honest-to-goodness reform. I fell for that too many times. I'm not falling for it anymore. So here we are again. You might think, well, okay, if we oppose the Orange Menace, and if we get the Democrats back into the House and Senate, elect a Democratic president in 28, we'll be back on the right track. No. Because with each one of the examples I gave you, we just continued our slide into what ultimately resulted in the Orange Menace. I'm not falling for this again. We need real revolution. We can get through this, and even if we win, nothing will change without a revolution, without real fundamental reform in how we do business. These Democrats fighting for the status quo, fighting for growth, having that as a default, as a fundamental axiom, we have to grow. When PBS and NPR were testifying last week in some congressional committee, a Republican cited a study, said that NPR had hundreds of references to the so-called far right and only a small handful of references to the far left, as though this was some big accusation, some big gotcha question. So he asked Catherine Marr, CEO of NPR, why is that? Why is it hundreds of references to the far right and almost none to the far left? And she had no answer. She just wriggled and kind of looked guilty. The answer was so easy. She just needed to look at him and says, Senator, there is no far left in this country. How do you cover something that doesn't exist? And then if the senator had pushed back, no far left, well, of course there's a far left. Ask him. Name a far left politician. I'll ask you right now. Name a far left politician. Go ahead. I'm listening. You can't. If you say AOC or Bernie, then that's just proof that you're brainwashed. On any reasonable scale of a political spectrum, AOC and Bernie are barely left of center. Name a far left activist. Can't think of one. Who's a far left activist? Name a far left organization. Let me think. Antifa? No, Antifa is not an organization. They don't have any kind of structure. They don't have personnel. They don't have a president. They don't have members. There's no such thing as Antifa other than an idea that fascism is bad and sometimes has to be defended against with force. Antifa is an idea. It's not an organization. So that's where we are. We have no left. We have no revolutionary thinking. We have nothing to meet the power of MAGA unless we build it. And then when it's all said and done, the things that got us here are gone. The insistence on limitless and endless growth. No, we need negative growth. We need anti-consumption, anti-manufacturing. We need less stuff. less business, more caregiving, more freedom, more guaranteed rights. The government should provide all economic rights: food, housing, healthcare, education, digital services, transportation, a universal basic income for basic needs, clothing, taking care of pets, leisure and travel, that sort of thing. Things will still get done. Food will still be grown and distributed. Clothing will be produced. All the material things we need we'll have. But all the junk we don't need will be deprioritized or eliminated, because we don't have to serve this mythical, magical kingdom known as the economy in order to keep funneling more and more money and power to the top 1%. Extracting resources from the earth, creating the goods and services necessary for a decent life, creating a world where we can all care for each other, where we can educate and learn, where we can be healthy. Nowhere is it written by any god in any stone that money has to be the very center of how we organize all of this. We don't need to have the fiercest military. We don't need to be the richest. We just need to be one nation among many who care for the rule of law and care for each other. We're not supposed to say these things. We're not supposed to even think these things. But I know that you are. And I know that hundreds of millions of people are ready for what's next. Orange Menace had a quick little press avail with Bibi Netanyahu on Monday of this week, and it was just disgusting. He just casually and openly called for removing all Palestinians from Gaza. Forced migration, of course, is a war crime. So he's just openly advocating for committing war crimes. Forced migration, forced deportations are war crimes. They're crimes against humanity. And he just sits back in his little Oval Office chair with a war criminal sitting right next to him who should be arrested whenever he crosses the border into another nation. According to the International Criminal Court, he's a criminal charged with war crimes and needs to be arrested wherever he goes. But no, you can come to the United States. You can come see your buddy, wannabe strongman Orange Menace, fellow war criminal. The reporters in the room didn't follow up, didn't say a word, didn't say boo. He openly calls for a heinous war crime that affects millions of people, and there's zero follow-up. They say nothing. Back to you in the studio. They go to the anchors. They say nothing. Not a peep. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, defines deportation as a war crime and a crime against humanity. Forced deportation of refugees is an internationally recognized human rights violation, which both the Orange Menace and Bibi the Butcher are guilty of. No mentions in the conventional media about the continued forced deportation, war crimes, genocide, and ethnic cleansing in Gaza this week. Bombs falling on hospitals, on women, on children. So yeah, had a couple of war criminals laughing it up in the Oval Office this week. Anyway, just some of the really heinous news, because God forbid we forget for a minute why it's so important that this whole thing be stopped. That we convince enough Republicans, the few that might still retain a soul, that this all has to stop. We have to kill fascism in its cradle, because it's not going to be in its cradle for long if we allow all of this to continue. I heard one commentator compare us to Hungary, as I've done myself. But it took Viktor Orban 2-3 years to accomplish what the Orange Menace has accomplished in 80 days. So American fascism is not going to be in its cradle for much longer. It's going to be up on its feet, running around doing all sorts of damage. We got to stop this thing. Which brings us to mutual aid. Let's talk about this for a minute. We've come to a point here where we have to prioritize mutual aid because we're going to need it. If the economy crashes, a lot of us are going to be hurting. with nowhere to turn. So we're going to have to turn to each other. Other scenarios are that the regime declares the Insurrection Act and really puts the hammer down on dissent. Free speech, freedom of assembly, arbitrary arrests, violence. These are all on the table. So this is why I feel very strongly that mutual aid has to become central to our strategy going forward, especially if, as I believe might be necessary, we have to emphasize strikes and boycotts over action in the streets due to this threatened violence. As great as the public demonstrations have been, as much as I'm advocating for that, I'm also being realistic about the regime's very possible, even likely, violent response. So here's what we're going to do. For the next couple of episodes here, we're going to take deep dives into two things. First, mutual aid. We're going to take some time to define what it really means, what it is, what it isn't, how to create a successful plan, how to put it into action, identifying community needs, building a team, establishing communications, organizing, recruiting, really putting this together. So next time, let's really talk about mutual aid. In the meantime, go ahead and do your homework. Search the term mutual aid. Do your own reading on this. Because we need to be up for the challenge here. And I believe more strongly than ever that mutual aid has to be a central part of our strategy going forward. Because of the scenarios ahead of us, one might be an economic crash, and the other might be an unleashing of violence and suppression from the regime. Now, speaking of that latter point, I also want to talk about what we should do if the Orange Menace does indeed invoke the Insurrection Act. If he brings violence into the equation, as he already has with undocumented folks, we need to talk about this. I found an excellent article, and you can look this up. I encourage you to look it up, and then we'll talk about it later. WagingNonviolence.org. Okay, jot this down. WagingNonviolence.org. Writer by the name of Daniel Hunter wrote an article entitled, "What Should We Do If Trump Invokes the Insurrection Act?" So, we'll talk about those things, but in the meantime, I encourage you to look up that article and also do your own research on exactly what mutual aid is and how you can implement it in your sphere, friends, neighbors. Okay? All right. You've been listening to a best of episode of The Log featuring clips from April 7th and 10th, episodes 519 and 520. Find all episodes at the website, charlespurcell.com, or on your favorite podcast platform. Follow on Substack and Blue Sky. Thanks to our home station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Peter Donalds wrote and performed the theme song. All right, I love you. See you out there.